Hey, it's Christy from Lululemon. I'm in the office with what's new, and the Breezily collection has definitely caught my eye. If you're like me and want to add some lighter, airy pieces to your wardrobe, this is a great place to start. There's a Breezily tank, shorts, and pants, all in our Swift fabric, which is super lightweight and stretchy. They're flowy staples you can mix and match for a really easy, elevated vibe, whether it's to and from the studio or just for every day. The Breezily collection is in store now, or you can shop online at lululemon.com.
I'm JJ Virgin, PhD dropout, sorry mom, turned 4-time New York Times bestselling author. Yes, I'm a certified nutrition specialist, fitness Hall of Famer, and I speak at health conferences and trainings around the globe. But I'm driven by my insatiable curiosity and love of science to keep asking questions, digging for answers, and sharing the information I uncover with as many people as I can. And that's why I created the Well Beyond 40 podcast, to synthesize and simplify the science of health into actionable strategies to help you thrive. In each episode, we'll talk about what's working in the world of wellness, from personalized nutrition and healing your metabolism to healthy aging and prescriptive fitness. Join me on the journey to better health so you can love how you look and feel right now and have the energy to play full out at 100. I have been waiting to interview this doctor for a while now. I am super excited to bring her here. I have been literally listening to all of her interviews, read her book, and was like, oh my gosh, there's so much that I want to talk to you about. Could you just stay for hours? So I will give you a heads up. This is a 2-parter. We are going to be going deep in this first part about wearable technology. Really, what can you find out by using a continuous glucose monitor? Why should you look at HRV? What stress really does to you and what social isolation does to you? And what are some of the biggest needle movers, the big rocks that you can focus on that will have huge metabolic health effects? Because metabolic health obviously is one of the biggest things taking us down, that along with social connection. So we're going to be digging deep into both of those. And then we'll come back for part 2, where we're going to talk about sexual fitness, sexual health, and some of Dr. Molly Maloof's, her big latest legacy project. So let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Molly Maloof. She is a health optimization and personalized medicine expert. She worked in San Francisco and LA, then moved to Austin. Now she's currently over in Wyoming. And she has been working now in digital health, consumer health, biotech industries since 2012, advisor to over 50 companies. In 2023, January, she came out with the Spark Factor. And the Spark Factor is the secret to supercharging energy, becoming resilient, and feeling better than ever. It's really the biohacking guide for women. But again, she really focuses on the macro things. Like a lot of times I feel like biohacking goes deep into the weeds before it fixes the big things first. She focuses on fixing the big things first. And it came out during our talk that a lot of this was her own personal experience, where in medical school, she actually created a course to help doctors overcome burnout and all of the health problems, because when she did it for herself, she went from being an average student to like 99 percentile on her boards. She also taught a pioneering course on health span in the wellness department of the medical school at Stanford, and then launched her own company, Adamo Bioscience. Again, you're going to hear more about that but in our second interview, but let me tell you a little bit about Adamo Bioscience. The vision of her company is to demonstrate that love is embodied medicine that enhances longevity and awakens a healthier, happier, and more resilient world where intimacy is the undisputed force for human flourishing. More on that again in the second interview. Again, in this interview, we're going to be digging deep into stress, connection, human connection, HRV, and blood sugar, and really how do we heal metabolic health. So I will be right back with Dr. Molly Maloof. Stay with me. Dr. Molly Maloof, I have been dying to do this interview with you. I'm so happy you're here.
JJ, you are one of my heroes, so it's a huge honor to be on your podcast. You're one of the most legendary healers in the world, so thank you.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So I've been like listening to all the podcasts with you, went through the Spark Factor, and it's like, can I have you just for days? I wish you were at the house. I'd sequester you here. But we were talking offline, and I like the idea of like digging into longevity the way you just mentioned. So maybe give a high level overview of longevity, and then we'll start to dig in.
Yeah. Well, if you talk to a lot of the men in the biohacking and longevity worlds, they'll tell you, oh, it's all about, doing all of these really intense small molecule drug discovery in order to find the missing, link to longevity. And I have a very different perspective. I think that the vast majority of people in America and the world will be able to lengthen their life pretty significantly through optimizing their metabolism and optimizing human connection, because I see these two pillars of health broken in so many people in modern society that it seems like first principles to think through how would you take an average person to optimal health and get them to live a longer and healthier life. So I used to teach a course called Live Better Longer, Extending Health Span for Longer Lifespan at Stanford. And one of the biggest, the biggest areas of optimal health that I really dug into were blood sugar regulation, because it's affected by your sleep, your stress, your movement, and what you eat. And also, your stress levels are affected by your relationships, and your stress levels are affected by your sleep. So I was really looking at blood sugar as like this ultimate biomarker for longevity. And then the thing that blew me away that I didn't understand was just how important social connection was to longevity, and that loneliness was worse for your health than smoking, drinking, sedentary behavior, and obesity. And I was just like, whoa, like this is an area that I should understand more. What is human connection? And that led me down this path of talking to experts like Helen Fisher and Sue Carter, these luminary scientists that have been spending their career studying the science of love. And Sue Carter wrote a paper called Loving Longevity. And one of her biggest areas of research has been oxytocin neurobiology. And oxytocin is a natural anti-inflammatory antioxidant. It's mitoprotective, it's cardioprotective. It's basically your own inner capacity to heal yourself through feeling connected, feeling safe. And that hormone is released when you cuddle a loved one, when you hug a loved one, when you pet a dog, when you have orgasms, and when you feel safe within your social bonds. And I see at post-pandemic, I saw all of our social bonds start to deteriorate, and people's mental illness just started to, skyrocket. And I asked myself, we've got to figure out what is underneath all of this. And I'd spent so much time studying metabolism and mitochondrial health, and that's largely what the book is about. But the book The Spark Factor, ends on the role of connection and longevity. So this is really what I've based my career around.
Boy, if you look at the worst science experiment for human connection.
Yeah, social isolation.
Oh my gosh, social isolation, and then turning your neighbors in.
Yeah.
Turning your neighbors in. Oh my gosh.
And then like forcing people to live in a home where they have no freedom and no ability to move. Humans are naturally designed to move and naturally designed to expand and explore. And to tell people that they have to stay in one place. So two ways that you will dramatically induce mental illness in animals and animal studies is immobilization and social isolation. So they will literally isolate animals, and also they'll do immobility studies. And this will guarantee mental illness. And I don't understand how we didn't take this research on animals and realize it would apply to humans, because it's not like we're not mammals as well,
Well, we just did the experiment. I just wonder how many years this is all going to set us back. In fact, my son and I were talking about that. We actually had, during the pandemic, one of my sons, my bonus daughter, my husband and I were all here, and then my ex-husband and other son were over every week, and we just, we were paddleboarding down the canal and like doing all sorts of stuff, and really spending a lot of time together. I was like, I'd never normally have this time. This is kind of a gift that you just have to take. But it's like, gosh, you just wonder. We were talking about some of the kids he tutors. He's getting his PhD in math, and he's like kind of a math ninja mentor, like life mentor. I said, what do you think about some of the kids in high school? He goes, it wasn't those kids in high school. So I kept feeling bad for the kids who are graduating from high school and now going up to college, and they just missed everything. And he goes, no, think about the little kids going to elementary school. And I went, oh, you're right. Like, they're set up for years with issues on it. So the connection side of things, because we've heard about it. How are people even identifying it, talking about it, doing something about it, Well,
so one thing that's important to understand when I was studying loneliness is that There's objective social isolation and subjective social isolation. So objective means that you're literally isolated and there's no one around you. Subjective social isolation can happen to anyone, where you could have people around you, but you just don't feel connected. You feel lonely and disconnected from those. Yet, I don't know if you've ever, I mean, anyone who's been in a relationship knows what it feels like to be fully seen and present with someone, and then for someone to close up and for someone to close off and to feel like, whoa, we're disconnected right now. And to me, it takes a certain level of awareness to be able to recognize this, because it can creep up on you, especially during, things like a pandemic where it kind of crept up on us. We just all sort of quarantined, and then we all didn't really know what to do, and then we were all isolated. But some people were living with people, but they still felt alone. And so one of the things that I learned at Stanford that's really important about breaking out of loneliness is recognizing this concept called maladaptive social cognition, which is that the more lonely you get, the more you're isolated or the more you feel isolated, the more your brain starts to actually become primed for social experiences being risky and dangerous, which is really strange. But basically, if you think about like primitive times, if a person was on the outskirts of their tribe, they would have been but basically they would have been in danger, because they could have been attacked by an animal or a neighboring tribe. So it makes sense that the nervous system would prime you to be on guard if you've been isolated, because if that is potentially dangerous, and primitive programming that's really ancient programming in your brain, that doesn't just get phased out through modern life. That's still there. So you have to recognize this maladaptive social cognition, because what happens is you'll start to socialize after being isolated for a while, and then you'll just start to pick up on little social cues as super negative, even though they might not be a big deal at all. And you just have to train yourself that, like, I had to teach one of my siblings this, because she was pretty isolated. And I said to her, Maddie, I was feeling the same way, like a year ago. And I literally had to go out of my way to build a community, because I was in a new town, new city, didn't have as many friends, and I wasn't feeling good. And I called my best friend, and she said, you need to make more friends. And I go, okay, I know I can do that. And I went out and I made friends. And the thing is, you have to learn that it doesn't take that much work to make a community. It actually takes a small nucleus of friends, and then having you introduce them. Basically, you have them introduce you to more people. So you use your social structure to create people around you. So what I did was I made friends with like 2 or 3 people, and I said, hey, I'd really like to meet more. And do you have any people that you should introduce me to? And it just sort of snowballs. And it sounds scary, because you have to kind of get over the awkwardness of making new friends in a new place. Or if you're in a city where you don't know that many people, you have to kind of like do a little bit of extra work to go out and find friends. But it only takes one, because one will lead to 4 or 5, 5 will lead to 10 to 20. Before you know it, you might have a group of 100 people in a new town. So I just think it's a prioritization thing for a lot of people. A lot of people get so stuck in their family structure. They get stuck with their community. Like, their community is really small, and they don't want to branch out, because honestly, the pandemic made people feel very unsafe socially. But I have personally, seen this method work really well with a bunch of different friends. And I think if you are a community builder out there listening, it's even more your responsibility to be the one to gel people together, because women were literally like the most important part of social bonding for like millennia. Like, it was literally we're designed for it. I mean, we're oxytocin dominant. Men are vasopressin dominant. Men are designed for protection. They're designed for defense, and they're designed to ensure that the survival of the tribe. But women in particular are so profoundly capable of creating these social bonds. And so I've really encouraged like all of my girlfriends to like, keep this community going, because I'm moving to a new city and I have this massive community in Austin. And I'm just like, I handed off this like, I have a WhatsApp group with about 100 women in it that I made. And it took me about a year to make that group. But I just think it's about prioritization and recognizing that it's your strength. If you are a woman out there listening, it's your strength to build community.
Well, literally, we would have died if we hadn't built communities.
Yes.
But it's so different than the men. I look at the men and they'll have like a couple guy friends. They don't talk about anything of importance to them. It's like, it's crazy. So yeah, it's the first thing that I always tend to do is like naturally start to build communities wherever I go.
You're a huge community builder.
And then you have them wherever you go, which makes it super fun. So I love to relate this over to the metabolic side too, because they're all intertwined, whenever
Totally.
you one thing. But, metabolic health just as this major issue going on that's just gotten worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
What I love about it is now we've got such simple things that we can do that give us the information so we can see what changes we need to make. So you are the one I follow when I look at, okay, what's going on in the med tech side? So I'd love to dig into some of your favorite tools and specifically talk about blood sugar, talk about HRV. And I've been waiting for this interview because I was getting so frustrated with my HRV because I was testing it every morning through my Apple Watch and Oura Ring, and it was like 15, 14, 13. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
What the heck? I do meditation, I do sauna, I lift weights, I do HIIT. I was like, okay, come on. Then I got a Polar H10 and it was like 50. I go, okay. So I'd like to break that apart too.
Let's so to transition from the connection piece to the metabolism piece. I put blood sugar monitors and HRV monitors on my clients when I first start working with them to help them realize the relationship between stress and metabolism and stress. And because metabolic stress can actually be stressful on on physiology, but like social stress can be stressful on metabolism. And I use this platform called Heads Up Health that my friend Dave founded, Dave Krunsky, who's a fantastic biohacking entrepreneur. And you basically can feed all these data streams into one platform and see, you can basically graph everything out. And I love data and I love information. And I don't necessarily recommend people become orthorexic with information. Like, it's really important that you don't become obsessed with stuff because that can actually cause more stress than help. So I'm all about using these as almost like diagnostic tools, and you can use them for interventions as well to do tests and see what works for you and what doesn't work for you. But I've got a friend who's got a company called Hanu Health, and you use a polar heart strap and you download an app, and you can actually see in real time. It's like a real-time telemetry of your stress. And so you can actually note it, because like the thing about the Oura Ring and the Apple Watch is that they're very far from your heart. So they're not actually that perfectly accurate because, you're moving a lot. And when you have something that's actually next to your chest, it's going to be the most accurate by far. And I love Hanu because not only is it, it's just basically great to have a real-time monitor. It's basically to see, oh, this thing causes me real stress and this thing doesn't. And I do have people using the Aura, and I don't think it's the worst solution, but it's definitely not the perfect solution by any means. And but I did have a client who noticed pretty clearly that her heart rate would go pretty high when her and her husband got in a fight. And I said to her, look, like, this has real effects on your physiology and your metabolism, because let's go look at what's going on with your blood sugar when this happens. And when you have a really stressful day, your blood sugar levels are higher, and you have to see these relationships. And Martine Picard is this researcher who studies social stress, psychosocial stress on mitochondrial function. So mitochondria are the organelles in our cells that process food, which are turned into substrates when we digest them, processes them into energy. And they also are sensing and integrating the environment to determine, am I safe or am I unsafe? And if I'm safe, I'm going to make hormones, and I'm going to create like healthy, blood sugar levels. If I'm unsafe, I'm actually going to prioritize survival. I'm not going to prioritize hormones. I'm going to make sure that you can get out of danger. I'm going to raise your blood sugar. I'm going to make you a little bit more insulin resistant. And it's all in design as an adaptive response. The problem is it's highly maladaptive if chronic. And this is the problem with most modern American lives, right? They're eating the wrong fuel. They're not moving their body. So the car's in the garage all day long producing exhaust, which on a cellular level is basically oxidative stress. And then there's a lot of stress going on. And that stress does tax the mitochondria, and it changes their function. And so there's a lot of research on caregiving stress in particular, which a lot of women are responsible for. And caregiving stress, basically, the way I would describe, there's stress on the outside, right? And there's stress on a cellular level. And on a cellular level, it's called allostatic load. It's like, how full can you get a cup before it overflows? Allostatic overload is when your stress cup on a cellular level is so overloaded that you're starting to get the side effects of this, which is your heart rate starts to rise because your body is trying to say, well, I mean, I'm not safe, so I'm going to raise my heart rate. And then that will lower your HRV over time. And so the number one thing that a lot of people are just missing is this awareness that, like, stress management is not just about self-care and recovery. It's about literally looking at the sources of stress in your life and asking yourself, what can I do at the root? What can I do at the source? What conversation do I need to have? What kind of therapy should I be looking at? For me, I mean, I did a fair amount of work on some trauma from college that had just been sitting in my nervous system, creating a lot of stress. And I've discovered even more amazing things lately, like neural therapy. I don't know if you've ever heard of neural therapy, but it's an osteopathic tool in the toolbox. And I've never done this before, but I did this in November and I'd never done it before. And I was kind of nervous about it because they're basically injecting your nerve ganglia all over your body, which are basically the seat of your autonomic nervous system. And they're basically resetting your autonomic nervous system and relaxing your body and basically creating a much more parasympathetic state. I felt like I did a 10-day meditation retreat in like an hour. And I was so chilled out for like the next few weeks. And I've still remained a lot more relaxed. And people have heard about the stellate ganglion block, but what they don't realize is that there's all these other ganglia in the body that a really good practitioner, there's probably only 250 good practitioners in the country that do this. And there's this guy, Dr. Tudor in Sedona. And I felt like I got a nervous system reboot. I mean, it was the coolest thing I think I've done in a long time. And so there's a lot of stuff that people can do to regulate your nervous system, especially if all of the things that you've tried haven't made a dent in your HRV.
So is that how someone would really know? Because I think one of the challenges that's been going on for years, because I started to look at stress 20 years ago, mainly because I saw two things. Number one, I saw that people who were stressed out had more belly fat, couldn't lose weight, couldn't build muscle, then had thyroid problems, then their sex hormones went off, then their blood sugar was like all these things, right? I'm like, But the challenge was that I had to identify all these things and tell them, look at all the markers, as opposed to, gosh, it would have been simple if there was a test. Is HRV really the one that we would watch for this?
I mean, it's definitely one in the toolbox, but I still use cortisol testing, especially if someone's going through like a really challenging period of time in their life, and they're fully burned out. Burnout's something that a lot of people have dealt with, and I don't talk about burnout enough in my book. And I really could write a whole nother book on burnout.
Well, define burnout. Like, what would you say with burnout, and explain HRV and cortisol testing as well?
So there's a lot of people that are basically not quote unquote depressed, but their work has created so much stress on their physiology that their bodies are adapting by basically first there's a lot of high cortisol states for months, and then eventually the body gets this negative feedback and it starts lowering the cortisol until it's flat. You get a flat line and there's no morning cortisol response. So when you get out of bed in the morning, you literally can barely drag yourself to work, and coffee no longer works without making you feel terrible, and you're basically just tired all the time and you just feel like you have no juice left. And it's usually related to chronic work related stress, usually. I've experienced burnout a few times in this life, and there was a final point where I was like, I got to figure out a solution to this. So this doctor that I worked with in my mid 30s, he taught me that you could take first of all, there's a few different options, but if you see on your cortisol testing that there is like literally no morning response, and now there's actually, there's actually home cortisol testing you can get nowadays, which I don't know how accurate it is, but I tested it when I was testing the home cortisol and I saw it was low. That's what I did, the urine cortisol from Precision Hormones, and it was still really low. And I was like, okay, I've got enough data points to know that my cortisol is low.
Meaning that it would give you an immediate result?
Yeah, there's new testing companies that are making it really easy. I wish I knew the name. I can't remember the name, but basically, there's Dr. Wilson is kind of like the father of quote unquote adrenal fatigue, but adrenal fatigue isn't really a real term. It's actually hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysfunction. And it's, to me, the way I kind of put this, it's the body's ability to respond to stress by helping to literally almost put you in like how do I describe it? There's a way to, it's what's called illness behavior. It's like you stop moving so much, you basically are, you sleep more, and your body basically is trying to like conserve as much energy as possible for healing, because it can't make enough on its own because it's just been overworked for so long. This happens to doctors all the time, by the way. There's so much
it's 40 to 60% or something crazy. Like, why isn't that profession making some major changes? Come on.
To be honest with you, I think the system's kind of collapsing upon itself, and there's like, And it's just like so many doctors are now waking up to like, whoa, what did we do here?
Yeah. I mean,
Need the system. I mean, we really need the system to function because there's so many reasons for it to exist, but it just doesn't, it's not designed for chronic illness. And that's why these doctors are chronically ill themselves, because they're working in a sickness system. It's a sickness billing industrial complex. It's really great for real, battlefield injuries like car accidents and trauma and like, serious heart conditions. Like, yeah, of course you're going to need this in medical industry, but it's not going to work super well for chronic illness. So I still use Dr. Wilson's products because for somebody who doesn't want to take prescriptions, Dr. Wilson's it's basically adrenal cortex, and it's a adrenal rebuilder. And whether or not you believe in the theory of adrenal fatigue, when I've been burned out, I can literally feel my kidneys. Like I have felt my back, and it's my kidneys are crying. They're like, stop working so hard. And so large doses of vitamin C and then adrenal rebuilder is fantastic. But if that's not working, the doctor I worked with in Silicon Valley taught me that you take like 5 to 15 milligrams of hydrocortisone, which is a very tiny, tiny dose. When you go to a mainstream doctor, they'll give you like 100 to 150, milligrams of hydrocortisone if you're like having a serious illness they can't figure out. This is like a microdose of that. So it can be just enough to sort of reboot the cortisol curve. And you basically take it in the morning and it starts giving you some relief from just feeling so sick. And you do that until your body starts remembering, oh yeah, I need to make my own. And it can take 6 months or so to heal from burnout, sometimes longer. And these are the people I would not recommend fasting for. I would recommend regular meal times. I would recommend making sure you get enough carbs because they typically, these are the people that like struggle with blood sugar. So if your cortisol is really low, then you're going to see your blood sugar really low. And you're going to wake up with headaches. You're going to wake up exhausted. And those morning headaches are a really good predictor that you need more hydration. You need more, you need probably a few more carbs in your diet. And you also need salt. So like that to me, this is like the burnout solution. Now, a lot of what my book's been written about has been written about the average person who's dealing with metabolic issues, who's like maybe not fully burned out and completely drained, but actually just like not able to lose weight. They're finding themselves kind of stuck and they're metabolically inflexible, which is the vast majority of Americans. Metabolic inflexibility is a huge issue. And I discovered in my early 30s that I was actually borderline pre-diabetic. And I was like, oh my gosh, how is this possible? And I was eating quite a lot of refined carbohydrates and sugar. And, I was like, I thought gluten-free foods were healthy. I mean, this is like, a long time ago, over 10 years ago. And before I even started my practice. And I knew something was wrong. So I put a blood sugar monitor on because I was doing some research for another company I was working for. And this company was trying to figure out what could they measure in the interstitial space through like a microneedle patch. So I'd done all this research and all these different analytes, and I go, pretty sure the biggest problem people are dealing with today is prediabetes and diabetes. So you might as well just do blood sugar if you can, because that's an industry worth disrupting. Fast forward, now there's like tons of companies in this space. I'm an advisor of one. I helped co-found one. I'm not going to talk about that disaster that happened, but suffice to say, I spent about 8 years on blood sugar monitoring, and it was a big eye opener for me because I realized that I could really improve my metabolism by just doing repetitive testing of different foods and seeing what worked for me and what didn't work for me.
So what are some of the big takeaways that you discovered was using a CGM? And then what would you recommend to someone listening? Like use it for a month, use it for 3 months?
Well, if you can afford it, I would definitely use it for at least 3 months if you can afford it. They're not cheap. That's the only downside. And these consumer companies, they basically, to make a profit, they have to charge more. But if you ask your doctor nicely, you can get an Abbott Freestyle Libre, and it's not the Abbott Freestyle Libre 3 is pretty darn effective. The Dexcom is far more accurate of all of them I found, but it's the hardest to prescribe. And so if you want to get a Dexcom, you can go to Levels, and I can give you a link to cut the line, levels.link/Dr. Molly. But if you don't want to spend that kind of money, ask your doctor for an Abbott Freestyle Libre 3, and they can call it into any pharmacy, CVS, Walgreens, and it's just widely available, which is why I like it. And it's the one I've used the longest. But it's more important to it's important to recognize that like these are not perfectly calibrated. I have found that at least 1 in 20 is kind of inaccurate. So I always have a finger stick monitor on the side just to double check. If something looks off, I'm like, I don't know if I believe that number. And then I'll go check it and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's not quite right.
Now, if it was off, it'd be off the whole way through, like
The whole way through. And then you can kind of correct for it.
Yeah.
You can correct for it, and the apps usually allow for some calibration as well. So, these technologies are getting better and smarter and more accurate every day, but they're still not perfect. So, and if you can't afford a CGM, I use a finger stick monitor for years. And so, I still think finger stick monitors are fantastic. But you got to keep in mind you're getting a snapshot instead of a movie. And so you might miss the spike if you see a spike. And I'm actually really curious what my blood sugar is right now because I've been monitoring it for like the last 3 months. And my boyfriend is a vegetarian and he has a chef, and I've been eating very different than I normally eat, like very, very, very different. And I'm like noticing, like, here's the thing that you should know. There's a really good book by Ellen Vora, and she's a psychiatrist in New York, and she has been studying the relationship between metabolism and mental illness. And I can guarantee that some of the things that I'm eating are not working for me because if you get a spike and a drop, you will start to learn what that feels like. And when you drop your blood sugar low, you can get very anxious. And if you're just getting anxious out of the blue for no reason with no like stimulus, you really need to look at your blood sugar. And so there's been plenty of times in the last few months where I've been like, oh yeah, I think my blood sugar is spiked and dropped, and like I really got to put a Dexcom on. So I got some sent to me.
It has been, I've got a son with a traumatic brain injury and bipolar disorder, and we know, like we've done everything diet-wise because we want him to go psychotic, drop his blood sugar. Like it's the fastest way to send him off the rails. It's like
okay. So fun fact, so post-COVID 2022, I was under the most stress of my life. I got COVID and my blood sugar started going haywire, which people don't realize that infections are a really, really big problem that can really screw up your metabolism. And so I was like talking to my friend Katrine. I'm like, Katrine, what am I going to do? She's like, I don't know. You can try Ozempic for a little while. It'll help you get more insulin sensitive. Well, I started taking it was a non-prescription version of it, this GLP-1 inhibitor. And I had dropped my blood sugar so low so many times that I was having full-on panic attacks. And I was like, okay, I'm done with these peptides. Like, screw this peptide. Like, I am never taking these again. I am nauseous. And my blood sugar is and I was wearing a blood sugar monitor, and I was like, oh, this is why I'm feeling so panicked. So a lot of women just are not in touch with what's going on inside their bodies. And I would love for the whole world to be as intuitive and have as much experience as I have with blood sugar monitoring so you can develop this understanding of what a spike and a drop feels like. But most people have no idea what's actually going on inside their bodies because they've never seen it and they've never related it and correlated their feelings to their numbers. And I have to have this conversation with my boyfriend all the time because he's not as much into biohacking as I am. And I'm like, babe, I have 10 years of experience figuring this stuff out. Like, there's a reason why I eat a certain way. So it's really food and nutrition and metabolism is a very personal thing. And you basically, like, the beauty of these devices is you start realizing that, like, optimizing health is not one size fits all. Like, you have to find the things that work for you. And you have to, like, your son, for example, he figured out probably the foods that cause him to drop his blood sugar, and he knows to avoid those. And I have found that some people do great with bananas and some people do terrible with bananas. And it's not linear for everyone, like different bodies, different metabolism, different microbiomes, different genetics. And so personalized nutrition is something I've really poured a lot of my passion into until very recently when I decided to shift gears into human sexuality because I thought, wow, that's a frontier I haven't explored yet.
I've now done 2 podcasts on it, but I was like, how has it taken me this long to have a podcast about sex? Like, why did it take like a decade to start talking about sex when we're all talking about it? We're just not talking about it here, which is where we all need to be talking. So I know we're definitely going to be talking about sexuality because it's such an important topic. I had the gal who created, is it called Meet Rosie or Hello Rosie? And then another doc on as well, but I feel like we're just starting to peel the onion. But let's finish let's finish metabolic health. Now, it's of course totally dialed in with sexuality too, but for someone looking at all of this and they were going to use a CGM, what are some of the big factors? Because I know one of the coolest things between using like an Oura ring and a CGM and really seeing, because I don't eat late at night, but boy, when I do, man,
Oh
is
yeah.
my morning blood sugar destroyed. It's like ridiculous, you know. But the other thing that I loved doing with the CGM is seeing how high I could get it to go at the gym.
Oh yeah.
That's what I try to explain to people. I go, forget this fasted workout and trying to burn fat during a workout. Go work out as hard as you possibly can. That's not when you're burning your fat. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, what things do impact your blood sugar. What could you do right now, without having a CGM that's going to start making a difference?
Well, the one thing that I would say is, especially for women who are hitting their 40s into their 50s, who are starting to notice their hormones shift. When our estrogen levels start to decline, we become far less insulin sensitive. So even Gwyneth Paltrow admits to shifting her diet from pulses and grains to paleo when she started getting into her 50s. I believe she just turned 50 or so. And so if someone who's as gung ho with her previous diet like realizes that that may not be working, it's probably happening for other women too. My friend Celia Chen, she came to me, and she's got a fantastic Substack called In the Pink, and she was interviewed in by the New York Times, and basically because there's this movement around perimenopause, and she did not realize that her diet was creating all these problems because she'd eaten the same diet for so long. So she put a blood sugar monitor on, and she noticed, oh wow, like I have a little bit higher than normal fasting morning fasting blood sugar, and if I even touch bread, I notice a big blood sugar spike. And yeah, that sugar in that cocktail, that's not working for me either. So the big ones are liquid sugars, powdered sugars, right? Like the powdered flour, like flour-based foods. These are just problematic for most people. You won't know unless you try them on, but like the white carbs, right? These things they get digested quickly, especially if you're somebody who has a lot of amylase, who's breaking down these carbs in your mouth. And liquid carbs just get vaporized, they get absorbed and they just will spike you. So you got to be super, super careful with the liquid carbs and very, very careful with food, sort of food order. So this is definitely something popularized by the glucose goddess, but eating your green vegetables and your fibrous foods first, your protein second, and your carbs last. Like she really kind of like popularized that in her book. We actually at one point were roommates in San Francisco, both very obsessed with blood sugar monitoring and shared a lot of knowledge with each other. And I love her platform. She's got a beautiful platform. So anyone out there who wants very targeted advice, like there's a whole section in my book on just like how do you deconstruct the curve. So there's the in beginning of the curve is your fasting blood sugar. It's what's going on overnight. So just like you described, if you go to bed and you basically wake up, let's say you go to bed and have a midnight snack, you wake up in the morning, your blood sugar's high. It's because you didn't have a long enough fast and you didn't burn through your glycogen stores to hit into your ketones. This is why intermittent fasting for some people can be really helpful for lowering fasting blood sugar. For me, it was very much like very helpful. I actually still do an occasional fast because I just find it really useful for keeping metabolically flexible. I don't do nearly as much fasting as I used to do, but it played a major, I mean, I actually think fasting, you got to be really careful with it because it's not just a metabolic practice, but it's a spiritual practice. So very, very important to like be careful with how much you fast. But there's a whole instructions in my book on how to gradually make fasting a part of your life if it's something that you are drawn to and think it could help. Now, some people try fasting and they're under so much stress that they just get really low blood sugar and they're bonking because they're actually not hitting into ketosis. And this is somebody who's probably metabolically inflexible and really should focus on metabolic flexibility first before digging into fasting. So this is somebody I would recommend shifting in and out of low carb versus higher carb and getting into ketosis and then going back into normal metabolism, training the gear shifting a bit. But for most people, you also need to look at just like the quality of the food you're consuming. Like the vast majority of people are eating way too much processed foods. So I'm just a huge believer in whole foods and as many kinds of produce as possible. I'm definitely not a carnivore. I am a big believer in diversity of produce and polyphenols and anthocyanins and all of the plant chemicals that can make you have a healthier body. Personally, I think gut health is really key to longevity. So I'll never be a carnivore, but I definitely do eat meat on occasion. Probably more than, I mean, I used to eat a lot more meat in Austin, but because I'm living in Jackson, I'm eating a lot of vegetables right now. I'm not eating as much, but really important is protein is a fantastic way to regulate your blood sugar. It's a great way to keep it stable, and especially if you're trying to lose weight, keeping that as your anchor of your diet can be really helpful. But don't forget about fiber, and don't forget about plants, because some plants are going to be high glycemic and some are going to be low glycemic. But in general, you need as many different types of plants as possible to maintain your microbiome, because that's going to have a huge impact on your general blood sugar levels, on your insulin sensitivity overall. So you've got to look at your overall insulin sensitivity. You got to look at the quality of your diet. You got to look at the kinds of foods that spike you. So there's a fasting blood sugar in the morning, and there's a postprandial blood sugar after meals. So your general, like how high the curve goes is largely dependent on the glucose load that you get and your insulin sensitivity. So there's really two camps here of like how to beat prediabetes and diabetes. There's the low carb people on one end, and they're like all of the people that are like, you just got to eat low carb and keto and then you'll fix all your problems. And then there's the high carb people on the other end. There's this guy called Mango Man Nutrition, and he actually is a type 1 diabetic who prescribes a high carb diet. It's wild, but they do actually have decent numbers. And if you actually look at Virta Health versus Mango Man Nutrition's programs, they actually have pretty similar improvements in hemoglobin A1C. So I'm sort of a believer of metabolic typing still. And Ayurvedic medicine, there's some truth in all of these patterns. Some people are tall and skinny and eat carbs all day long and they're fine. And they eat any fat and their blood sugar goes haywire. Some people are big boned and they just look at a carb and they put on 10 pounds. So you got to also just take a look at a person and look at like your family and look at your ethnicity and ask yourself, what am I most suited for food wise? And I don't know if you've seen this in the world, but like it definitely is sometimes an experimental, it can take experimenting to figure out where do you actually like lie in the carb spectrum? What's going to be best for your body?
I think it's so interesting. Like my take on all of it, and what I have been having people do is, and this is all the next book, is eat protein first, then add in non-starchy vegetables. The reason being is that I hear too often from women, not from guys, from women, I can't eat all that. I'm like, so eat it first. Because you'll get the same good blood sugar response, but I know you got it in. I'm not worried about you getting your veggies because women will eat their veggies, but they don't eat enough protein. So I'm like, eat your protein first. Eat it first, eat it first, eat it first. But so if we created protein as an absolute, and then we look, and if you look at it and go, okay, this is where the carnivore diet it's so hard for my brain to wrap around. However, it was interesting. I did this reality show called Freaky Eaters. And most of the people that went on Freaky Eaters couldn't give up their cheese or their potatoes. And like literally we had multiple people that we could have had just chronic episodes on French fries, people who would only eat French fries or only eat cheese or whatever. But we had two guys who would only eat meat. One would only eat raw meat and one would only eat meat. And I'll tell you what, I was going through, because we had to do a case against them and why they were going to die and blah, blah, blah. But I'm looking at their blood markers and I'm like, they're pristine. They look amazing. They're ripped, they're lean, they're fit. And I'm like, oh boy, I had to go and let's show parasites because I don't know what else to do here. We'll have to figure something out.
Or a stool study, maybe.
That's what we did. We did stool studies because I'm like, and showed them tapeworms. But it just makes so much sense to me to eat, protein, plants, lots of non-starchy vegetables, a little bit of fruit. You'll get the fat from the protein. And then from that point beyond, if you look at carbs and fat, they're energy calories. Like protein's not an energy. Protein, if we're using protein for energy, it's because something's off, right? So protein's for building and fat and carbs are for energy. How much you need, I'm one of those people, when I did my genetics, it's like you can do protein, you can do fat, you can do carbs, it doesn't really matter. I know for me, if I start in the morning and hit myself with a bunch of carbs, I feel like crap. So,
I'm hungry all day if I do that, you know?
but if I eat a little carbs at night, I sleep better. So, I'm always looking at what works best for someone. We know men, if they eat some carbs at night, they're going to do better with their testosterone. So,
And your fitness levels and how much you're exercising, you know?
right. Yeah. Your insulin sense. So that's the big question. When you look at blood sugar and you look at insulin sensitivity, and blood sugar is kind of a late marker for insulin sensitivity. Um, are you having people test? Like, I still don't understand how we're not testing fasting insulins. Why we would, what the heck? Like, why are we doing blood sugar? Maybe an A1C, but where's the fasting insulin? That's like this
Yeah.
cheap little thing that could tell us so much. I was on Dr. Phil for a couple years, and we had this gal, this poor girl. She was like, we were doing this fat loss, this teenage weight loss competition. And this girl's 6'4", I think. She was like, had some weird growth hormone stuff going on, et cetera. So I'm like, well, did anyone check a fasting insulin? And I remember I got in so much trouble because I'm the nutritionist. I'm like, okay, it was 27,
Oh my gosh.
right? No one ever checked this poor girl. I'm
It's
like,
one of the best tools in the toolbox. Hemoglobin A1C is a garbage test. It's super inaccurate. There's a lot of reasons why it's not accurate. And it's not a good predictor of prediabetes. It's an okay marker for diabetes. And it's been touted as this like magical test that will just diagnose everything. And I had a woman in my practice who was dealing with depression and skin problems, and her blood sugar monitor looked perfect. And I go, this is weird. I guarantee you've got blood sugar issues because you got acne and you've got, all these other symptoms. And we go run her fasting insulin and it's like 16. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. So what people don't realize is that your body's going to adapt to your glucose load by initially raising your insulin level. And then eventually over time, if your blood sugar is spiking, and if it's actually like that can actually affect your beta cell function. And over time, if you're constantly pushing out lots and lots and lots of insulin, you only have so much organ reserve in your body. There's only so much organ reserve. So you don't want to like screw up your pancreas. You really want to keep that thing alive, that thing kicking for as long as possible, which is why I am a believer of, if you're young and healthy, fit and fertile, a young woman, and you're like super active, yeah, you might be able to eat more carbs than somebody who's in her mid 40s or early 50s. And women need to accept the fact that our lives are going to be affected by hormonal shifts. And so this is why I'm a big believer in like get some measurements once in a while. You don't have to do them nearly as often as I do, unless you're crazy or you just love optimizing health like I do. I personally just love the information.
well, what measurements are you recommending people do?
I mean, I'm doing a lot for my first panel, but I'm doing a full thyroid panel, not just like T3, T4, but like free T3, free T4, TPO, thyroid globulin. I always look for globulin antibodies because there's so many thyroid issues with women.
And do you want to have someone, where do you want to see someone in all of that?
I like personally to see a thyroid, the TSH much lower than most doctors. So I like it around 2.5. And a lot of people are dealing with subclinical hypothyroidism, where their TSH might be normal, but their free T3 and free T4 and T3 and T4 are all out of whack. And if you're not looking at the whole big picture, you might just miss it with TSH. So I'm like just a big believer of like, if you need a little touch of thyroid medicine, get some custom compounded made and just see how you feel. And if you feel great, then it's working. Some people try it and they're like, nope, I don't want this, and they stop. But it's worth experimenting a little bit with hormones, especially if you're struggling with metabolic issues. I honestly can write a whole book on thyroid stuff, and there's just not enough room in my book to write everything I wanted to write about, which I'm glad we're having this conversation today. But I also love to check iron levels, ferritin levels. And so just because there's a lot of women deal with iron issues all the time and they don't realize it. And you might have normal iron levels, but low ferritin. And so that's not good enough either. So you really do need to optimize your ferritin because it's your storage of your iron. And then I look at testosterone, free testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin, estrogen, progesterone. Obviously, those are very dependent on the time of month tested. And then I'm looking at homocysteine and CRP for oxidative stress and inflammation, CMP for just general organ function, CBC for your immune system health, and then I look at cardiovascular markers like NMR lipoprotein profile, to look at not just your total cholesterol and LDL, but the particle numbers and the LPIR scores, just to see if there's insulin resistance that way. And then I also look at omegas. I'm a huge believer in pharmaceutical grade omegas. I take 4 grams a day, and I really believe it's the best anti-aging drug that people don't realize is available.
That was one of the things I did with my son Grant in the
Yeah.
hospital. They would only give him 2 grams, and I was like, no, we have to get to 10. I brought them all the research, and they wouldn't do it. But he hacked up his feeding tube. So then I was like, game on, man.
Yeah, I use a company called Norway Direct. You can buy pharmaceutical grade as a consumer product, and it's taken me forever to find the right sourcing. I literally had to learn about the fish oil industry. I even visited Oslo and learned about fish oils firsthand, figured out, okay, so all of these are made in certain factories, and then you trace the consumer brands from Norway, and you find the brands that are made in the same factories as the prescriptions. Because if you get pharmaceutical grade omegas, you are getting like an actual pharmaceutical product that can, I believe, at least I've noticed on my own labs, like in my brain function, like I just have a better functioning brain, and I have better skin, and we used to have like 1-to-1 EPA, omega-3 to omega-6s, and now it's like 1-to-20. And that's not healthy. And so I'm a big believer of also checking your omega-6 levels, seeing if you're too high in linoleic acid, if you're eating too many vegetable oils. I'm a big fan of the company Zero Acre Farms, and I also they make some of the best cooking oil in the world. And then I also it's mostly monounsaturated fat. And then I also source olive oil directly from Italy because I'm just such a stickler on oils. Like, you do not want to put crappy oils in your body. Big no. I'm not wild about large quantities of coconut oil, but I still do consume some coconut oil. But I'm ApoE4, so I try not to go crazy with coconut oil. But I just think that, like, optimal health is not rocket science. Like, you just got to get your nutrition right and your relationships right, and and exercise properly and sleep okay, and you can figure out you can solve a lot of problems that way.
I love what you're saying, because one of my takes on biohacking, and come on, one of my best friends is one of the big biohackers out there, but I'm always like, we've got to major in the majors before we major in the minors. We got to fix your diet first, because I don't care, like, if you're going and doing your cold plunging red light, if your diet sucks.
If your diet sucks, you're screwed. And if your relationships suck, I don't care how much you work out in the gym. If your relationships are garbage, I mean, arguably, if you work out at a gym, you probably have more friends than the average person, because people who go to gyms have friends, because gym people are friendly, because they have endorphins running through them.
I know, they're all in it together. Yeah, you don't see people fight at the gym.
Austin has a gym called Collective, which I actually, since I'm not living in Austin, I should probably cancel my membership, but they are an amazing gym, and it's a community as well. And so I really tell people, if they're struggling to make friends, like, go to a gym, because people are nice. Honestly, I've never been to a gym where I didn't immediately have some friendly interaction.
Yeah. So you said diet, relationships, sleep, exercise.
And then the last one is sexuality.
And sexuality, but we have to touch exercise for a moment. Like, that's my world as an exercise physiologist, but I'd love to kind of get your take on exercise, what you focus on, what you see as important as we're 40, 50, 60 on.
Yeah. Well, when I lived in Austin, which was only until very recently, I was pretty much a regular gym goer, and I loved weightlifting, and I had a great trainer, and I'd never had a trainer before until I just decided maybe I would get better results with a trainer, and I did.
Imagine that.
Who knew? But I've always been like, well, actually, so my 20s were highly sedentary, and I actually screwed up my health pretty dramatically in my 20s, because I was so focused on education, and I was so unfocused on, funnily enough, I was becoming a doctor, but I wasn't focused on health.
Wouldn't it be amazing if they actually had doctors, as you're going through it, having to do the things that you should do to be healthy? Could you imagine if there was a medical school that would be that innovative, you know?
In fact, when I was in medical school, I was really struggling, and I was basically like, I don't know if I can make it. So I went to a psychologist, and he's like, you're not crazy, you're not depressed, you're not anxious, you're just a stressed out medical student who's not taking care of herself. He's like, you got to do better at taking care of yourself. So I stopped skipping meals. I stopped eating cereal for meals. I stopped doing all-nighters. I started doing yoga, started meditating. I started spending more time with my family and friends. I basically did a whole overhaul of my lifestyle, and magically my grades started skyrocketing. My I started getting outstandings. I was getting very average grades. And I like started getting like higher and higher test scores. And that's when I was like, whoa, light bulb, something's up here. This isn't just fixing my like mood. This is making me better at everything. And then I got a 99th percentile at my board exam. And I was like, and I had an average on my step one. And so my whole school was like, nobody jumps that high, Molly. What did you do? And I'm like, I didn't cheat. I promise I didn't cheat. I was just changed my lifestyle. And they're like, wait. You got to teach us. What are your secrets? So I created a course in medical school that was actually added to the curriculum. And I recruited all these doctors that knew about sleep, that knew about relationships, that knew about burnout, that knew about
Oh my gosh. Is this still being used, I
I
hope?
don't know. I have to actually call the University of Illinois, but I brought in integrative doctors, functional doctors, nutritionists. I mean, I was like, this is not part of our education, and it's changed my life. And it was really, I actually won a few humanitarian awards for this
It
course.
should be in every medical
It should be
school.
it should be a curriculum for every student, because not only would it make them better at being students, happier students, but they would carry that into their practices. And the fact that most of what we learn is pharmaceuticals and surgery is a travesty. And there's a reason why most cardiologists I meet are overweight or obese. And or like if they're healthy, it's because they know. Like one of my mentors, Ron Rabjohns, is this cardiologist in Illinois, family friend, and he's always cared about his diet and meditation. But they're rare. Most doctors are not as healthy as they should be because the job doesn't allow for the space for people to take care of themselves. But I have found that if you invest in your health and you build your energy capacity, you discover hidden capacities. You discover like you can do things you didn't know you could do. Like I never would have thought that I would have taught at Stanford. I didn't get into Stanford. I didn't like as an undergrad or a medical student. And then I ended up teaching at Stanford in the medical school. And I was like, what? And I guarantee that was a product of building my health over a decade. That was not just because I got smarter. Like I actually got smarter and fitter. But going back to your question around fitness, I was super unhealthy in my 20s, a super sedentary. I actually think that created ADHD because I did not have ADHD as a young person, but my brain stopped working. And so I started taking Adderall and then I eventually weaned off of it, thank God. But it was like a really big problem for me to focus. And I really credit the sedentary behavior for decreasing my energy capacity and screwing up my brain function and really causing me real problems to the point where when I eventually decided to leave mainstream medicine and start my own medical practice, I was pretty chronically fatigued. And I actually could not work easily outside of just laying in bed on my computer. Fortunately, I found a job that enabled me to work online, but it was not a healthy time in my life. And I decided that at that time, I was like, I need to go back to my roots. I need to go back to what I know is true, which is I need to build a practice around optimizing health. And I need to figure out what health is on a scientific level. And I need to build my career on this. And I know it'll pay off someday, but it was a huge risk. And I probably would have been emotionally, I was way, way, way better off leaving that system. But it did take me about a decade to slowly get my body into better physical shape. So I first started with Feldenkrais, because that's all I could do at the YMCA across the street, and sauna. That was literally all the exercise I could do, is raise my heart rate with sauna and do Feldenkrais on the floor. And then I started walking to work instead of driving to work. And then I started using Beachbody on demand and weightlifting and at first I used a kettlebell and an app from this British dude. I started using kettlebells, and then I bought power blocks and started doing Beachbody. And then before I knew it, I was dating this guy, and he was like, "You got to learn how to use gym machines." So he taught me how to use gym machines. And then I started running again because I'd been a runner before, and I just started enjoying running to farmers markets. So I was weight training, I was running, and then I started doing Ashtanga yoga. And all of these things started building upon themselves to the point where I was actually pretty fit. But it took me a good amount of time to get back into shape. And that's what I try to teach people is like, if you want to go faster, get a trainer. But I didn't have the money at the time. I was just out of medical school. I was like, just out of finishing my internship and my residency, and I didn't have a lot of cash. And so sometimes you just have to make do with what you got. And if you can afford a trainer, even better. But
look at how many options there are now out there. Like this is not like it was 20 years ago, right?
You can get in great shape with an app. I mean, Kayla Itzines, I used her app for a while, and that app is fantastic. And now my personal interest is like, how do I get in shape using nature? How do I go outside and hike? How do I learn? Like, there's so much outdoor stuff to do.
That's a whole nother piece of this.
Yeah.
That, I mean, it's fantastic living in Tampa because I literally live on half an acre on the water. I walk outside, into the grass. I have a TRX in the grass. I got paddle boards. So, how do we do more of that? That is mission critical, and getting sunlight and getting in the dirt. It's interesting, my son with the brain injury, one of the first things he started to do, he's done so many intuitive things coming out of it. Like he wanted to get in the dirt. He started gardening and growing. And I'm like, what do you do? Like just knew he needed to do
It's so
that.
good for you. So, I mean, one of my siblings was really struggling with depression after the pandemic. And I said, get into nature. It will help you. And she started going into nature, hiking and like canoeing. And she's like, Molly, like nature healed me. And I mean, it just brought me to tears because people don't realize that nature is the best medicine, but most people just don't prioritize it. They don't go find it. Maybe they don't have access to it, but there's usually a park in most cities. Green space is better than nothing.
Right.
And vacations are a great way to sort of use nature to explore what you want to learn how to do, make your vacations around fitness.
You talked about how you started putting all those lifestyle habits in place and you got a 99 percentile on your board exams. And arguably you were probably studying less, right? And I look at this and go, like, I started going to Dr. Joe Dispenza retreats a couple years ago. And after the first one, when I realized how much I sucked at it, and I thought, okay, I've got to come back and I'm going to commit to this. I'm like, how am I going to add this into my life? And the craziest part was, because it's like I'm exercising, sleeping. I add this in, I'm more productive. I'm getting so much more done in so much less time, right? And I think that's an important takeaway if you're listening, going, but I'm so busy. It's like you might be busy, but not effective. You do these things, you're efficient.
It's kind of like your body has this capacity to like your body has this capacity to really run optimally. And it's not when you're eating lots of garbage food and having blood sugar spikes constantly and like literally damaging the engines of the cells. It's not, the electricity is not going to flow smoothly. But when you can get energy to flow smoothly through the body consistently, then I think that we are all just deeply magical beings. Like I think healing is just as much a mental process as a physical process, right? So I always tell all my clients, like, when we're doing all these things to fix your health, do not forget about the affirmations. Do not forget about directing that energy properly. And that meditation is like such an important part of my life. Like I'm becoming like very much into the Sadhguru path because I love his work. He's super conscious being in this world. I love Dispenza's work. I love just people realizing that you can harness the superpower and everything's going to be easier if you optimize your health. Everything's going to be easier if you focus on the things that really work, which is sleep, movement, stress management, relationships, and your food,
And it
getting
comes
into
first
nature.
with that decision, which is really mindset. Like I love that study
Yes, mindset.
right? I mean, people who are excited about aging live 7.5 years longer. What I didn't realize when I sat down, I've become buddies with Dr. Joe, and I was sitting at dinner and I didn't realize all the things that I did to help Grant survive the unsurvivable were immediately from the first time, like telling Grant, this is going to be the best thing that happened to you. You're going to be 110%, prove all the doctors wrong. Like that's all we did. We didn't think, we would
Yeah.
not let any thought entertain
No.
it come into our brain. Like it was like, nope, that's not coming in. Nothing where he couldn't possibly be amazing. And I think it's the same with our health. You first have to have such a clear vision of you as this healed, healthy, amazing, like you said, magical being, right? And, because everything's created twice, right? So you have to see it in your mind's eye first.
Yes, totally.
Yes, yes. So meditation is that opportunity to be your future self and then draw it to you, as Dr. Joe would say.
Totally.
All righty. So we are going to dig into Dr. Molly Maloof's real legacy work, her big project, and that is her new company, Adamo Biosciences, and everything around how to create sexual fitness, how to optimize sexual health. And again, this is that company that she is building so that she can demonstrate that love is embodied medicine that enhances longevity and awakens a healthier, happier, and more resilient world where intimacy is the undisputed force for human flourishing. I just love that so much. So be sure to come back and listen to the next interview that I'm doing with Maloof all around sexual health, sexual fitness, and how to take your sexual life, your sex life, to the next level. Hey, JJ here, and just a reminder that the Well Beyond 40 podcast offers health, wellness, fitness, and nutritional information that's designed for educational and entertainment purposes only. You should not rely on this information as a substitute for, nor does it replace professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you have any concerns or questions about your health, you should always consult with a physician or other healthcare professional. Make sure that you do not disregard, avoid, or delay obtaining medical or health-related advice from your healthcare professional because of something you may have heard on the show or read in our show notes. The use of any information provided on the show is solely at your own risk.